Hello and welcome to another edition of the Business Buzz. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, and we're kind of following up on last week's exciting show because many of you, myself included, very interested in the state of the Connecticut economy. And as we have a return panel, we have Brian Kerrigan. He's on the board for Small Business Connecticut, which is headed by Colleen Ferrari. And we have Bill Dorr, who himself is a small business owner, a owner of Sellmore Marketing, located locally in central Connecticut, a longtime entrepreneur. And we're talking, as we were last week, about the issues facing Connecticut's economy, as well as the small business owner. And I think, the Connecticut economy needs a shot in the arm. I believe it will have to happen from small businesses, like the kind that you help and support. In fact, I believe Connecticut's ranked in the bottom 5 in terms of job growth and economic growth overall. One of the few states that actually has not come out of the recession. So I think it needs something to pull us out, and I think I agree from our last conversation, all of you, that it's going to be small business, because I don't see a lot of Fortune 500 companies going to be relocating to Connecticut anytime soon. So, Brian, I'll throw this out to you. The first question, why did you become a part of Small Business Connecticut?
Because I deeply believed in what they were trying to do. One of the things that I try to do with my practice is effectively be that advisor that companies don't have. But not every company can afford to have a one-on-one advisory person on staff. They may be too small. They may not be at the point where they need that kind of attention. But Small Business Connecticut gives them a marketing plan. It gives them peer-to-peer advisory groups. It gives them Ask the Expert calls. So it gives them resources. It may not be economical for them to bring in a consultant, but it gives them the resources they need to succeed.
So would you kind of conclude, Colleen, being the driver of all this, or the central driver, that it's not what you offer is not a generic template, but expertise that can actually be available to the small business owner?
Absolutely. I think we bring the community together to help small businesses, and that's the beauty of it, and that's why we keep the price down. Is there's people like Brian, there's consultants and advisors like Bill that are all really volunteering their time right now to really be a part of this and create a community that's very special, and it's working.
Do you think Connecticut's done enough to help small business?
That's a tough question. We're the hardest state right now to have a small business in. I mean, if you look at our tax structure, and they'll admit it, I don't think Governor Malloy is going to deny that. Right now, it's very tough to have a small business in the state of Connecticut.
But isn't that kind of counterintuitive, that you think that you'd want to make it, as a economy like Connecticut has struggled, and has struggled really over the last 15 years overall? Wouldn't you understand that it's not government that's going to pull you out of this, it's business, and wouldn't you be more business friendly and not the exact opposite?
I think the question right now from what I understand from Department of Economic Development, is they don't know how exactly. So where does a tax break come? When we're trying to bring business into Connecticut, does a tax break go to small businesses? I think that's a very tough thing to say. And I don't want to weigh in politically, because I'm certainly not an expert. I know they're giving more funds to economic development, and they're trying to give resources to business. But I think the challenge is still really this. It's a tough state to make a living in, and the cost of living is very high. And small businesses need just a little bit more than a library of resources. We really need to reach out and put our arms around them and make a difference.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense to me. Now, Bill, you were talking about the kind of bullpen that Small Business Connecticut has, and how they're kind of not everyone can be a part of the group. Tell us about that process from your perspective, in terms of what it means to a small business person, in terms of organizations that are part of a Small Business Connecticut are highly vetted.
Well, I think the word AA comes to my mind, and not because you want to go out and have a drink if you decide to start a small company, but affordable access to resources, like Colleen's saying, that can really give you that support to kind of get through those dark times when you're starting out and you're not sure if you've started doing the right thing or whatever, and get you to the point where you start to have some hope and confidence. Because more than anything, and you've been in business a long time too, a business has a period of time before it becomes what everybody looks at and says, oh, well, of course, they're established. There's that early period where you really don't know. But if you have a good plan and a good process and good execution and support to pull it off, you have more confidence, and each day that you move along that pathway, you see more and more results. I'm not talking out of turn here, but at one point, Colleen, invested in this great idea, and she had zip for cash flow, but she had a great idea. That balancing changes. The great idea is still there, but now the cash flow is starting to rise up and exceed income. So there's everybody. We've all been there and done that. So when you're talking on a peer-to-peer basis, you're talking with people who understand where you're coming from, and more importantly, where you want to get to. Fair?
Yeah, I think that's interesting from my perspective, having interviewed so many businesses, and just from my own personal experience, is that a lot of people, a lot of small businesses might have a great idea. It's when the heavy lifting comes into play that separates the boys and girls from the rest of them, right?
Absolutely.
Very
that's
true.
interesting. Now, and again, we're not talking anything about politics, but you talk about the small business person, and Brian, I'll throw this question to you. If you're in a state like Florida, West Virginia, those are growing states. The pie is growing. Isn't it just that much more difficult in Connecticut because the pie is to some degree shrinking population-wise and other, and maybe even economically to some degree, that it's just tougher to fish?
It is tougher to fish, but I think as a small business owner, you want to make sure that you have all the resources available so that you're one of the successful ones. Mm-hmm. Not everybody's going to be successful, unfortunately. We all wish that could be the case. But you want to be a small business owner who has access to the information and the expertise and the peer advisory board that's going to help you navigate and be one of the successful ones.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And now, Colleen, this is a very difficult question, not because it's difficult in terms of the answer, but just kind of throwing it out at you. Is there anything that you've gleaned from the years that you've been on board with this venture that you can look for common mistakes? Is there any commonality between mistakes or maybe mindsets that you see that plague small business people?
Yeah, I think the first biggest detriment to any business owner is believing that they know all the answers, because no one does. No one opens a shoe store because they have a Harvard MBA and this is the absolute best shoe to sell in this demographic. They sell shoes because they love it, and that's why most small business owners get into it. But you have to be open-minded to know that you don't have all the answers. I think the other thing is you can't be half in. I think we talked about that last week.
I think that is a concept that sounds so simplistic, but I have to just think that's bigger than we're giving it its due.
I absolutely think if you have an exit strategy, you're not going to give it everything you have. And small business, it is like Mount Everest. It's hard and it's challenging. And if you want to be able to climb that mountain, don't fool yourself to think that you're going to have this great idea and all of a sudden you have this wonderful business. There's so many moving parts and you need great people around you to bring it there.
You can talk about, the hard work and everything else, to some degree is a fear factor, but I would have to imagine, I'm not even talking about getting to the point where, the money's just rolling in, but getting some traction has to be highly invigorating. When you start seeing, and doesn't that kind of have a dovetail effect or a snowball effect that now it almost becomes a self-perpetuating process, just as the reverse does as well, that you're really starting to dig that. You're working hard is a lot of fun because you're seeing people saying, yeah, Colleen, I love your idea, Bill, I love your idea, whatever, that it starts taking a life of its own, can't it?
It absolutely can, and I think there's a danger with that too, because as it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy and that snowball gets bigger and bigger, you stop being aware of how the market's changing, how your customer base is changing, how your competition is changing.
Blinders. Yeah.
Right, so it brings up another set of issues. I think you can't just start a business and it's going to escalate. Yeah, it's a continuous process of discovery.
Colleen, I think that's really interesting because you look back at, and most of the case studies are just big businesses, but everything in retrospect seems so easy. Like, oh, how'd you never know that, right? But things even like Levi's, I think they're doing better now, but they were almost out of business because the hip hop thing came along, and they probably had some old school kind of managers like, it's not gonna last, and 5 years into it, they were almost down the river. So they were a victim of their own almost become arrogant to some degree. So even though a small business wouldn't really fit, that model as well, but hey, it's working real well. People are always going to love reading newspapers. You know, I mean,
We're using typewriters.
exactly. So that's it. And also sometimes, you know, when I have conversations with my students, like, you know, it's how you define your business. Like you say, typewriters. If Smith Corona said they were in the publication business, not the typewriter business, it could have been a different story, couldn't it have been? They might have not
absolutely.
stuck to buggy whips or whatever he has.
Transportation, not trains, right?
There you go. Yeah, we talked about that one before. So, you know, we're in a difficult economy. I do think, and you would have a better indication than I would, although I talk to so many business people. I believe we're starting to make some headway. And Brian, I'll throw that out to you. Do you think we're making a little headway through the bad economy?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that we're making a little bit of headway. I mean, has it come as far as we'd like? No. But you know, I wouldn't, if someone came into my office today as opposed to 2008 and said, well, I really want to start a business. In 2008, I would have said, you know, you might want to back off. This really may not be the right time. But I think the economic infrastructure is in place for you to have a successful small business these days.
I would concur. I don't, you know, it's not, you know, 1996,
Right.
but it certainly is a lot better than it was like even 3 years ago.
Right.
You would agree with that?
Absolutely.
And what do you see out there? Do you think people are more optimistic than they were even like 2 years ago?
I
mean, they're not
I
giddy.
would hope so. I would hope so. And I think, you know, going to the issue, while there's a lot of people who are situs is in Connecticut, a lot of the times the business and the marketplace is outside of Connecticut. I mean, the internet has really opened up a huge number of opportunities. You know, it's like a closed system. The energy, the financial energy, has to be found somewhere. If it gets depressed in one area, it's going to show up in another. And I know a lot of people are doing business with people all over the country, especially some of the hotter spots where the engine is starting to cook up, because they're looking for problems and they're finding opportunities. And I used to do that networking in the hidden job market thing, and I used to say, if you go looking for work, or a client, you're going to find problems. But if you go looking for problems, you're going to find clients. So if you get that, you know, Yankee mentality of, you know, where's the problem, and you define it, you clarify it, you communicate it, and you look for where that group of people or demographic has that problem, you're probably, with a little bit of support, going to do very well for yourself. Thank you very much. I mean, people still spend money every day in Connecticut.
You know, I think that's an interesting
Let's not
point
forget that.
because, again, you know, talking about, you know, Marshall LaRue, the person that's kind of doing a lot with job seekers, but I think it's the same is true for small business people. If you look for a job that's maybe not going to be the best, you know.
Well, that's me-centered.
Exactly.
Let me find a problem. That's you-centered.
That's exactly
and no
what I mean,
prospect
yes.
really cares about you. They care about themselves.
Exactly.
But if you show that you care about them, then you might get together and do business.
And isn't that almost a change, Colleen, in mindset that may take some of the pressure off? And I know, Brian, we talked about sales last week in terms of if you're looking not to sell, but you're looking to solve problems. I mean, you have to be, you know, you have to be forward driven and so on and so forth. But, you know, if you're looking to sell, it's like, what's in it for me? If you're looking to help people with your expertise, isn't that a better equation?
I think without question. I think B&I is based on the idea that givers gain, or,
Yep.
you know, St. Francis of Assisi is, you know, just lost it. But, you know, it's, how did that happen? But, you know, it's all about doing to others and, you know, give of yourself and it will come back to you. And I think that's true. When you go out there and you solve problems, the people, and we were talking about selling, right? Last week we were saying, you know, how do people sell and what does that market look like? Well, when you are giving and you're just giving free of yourself, the rest comes back to you. I think that's part of the business model now. You can't, like in 1996, you could just go out there and, you know, I have a typewriter to sell or whatever it is, and you can sell it. But I think the market's changed. Small business owners can't do that any longer. They, you know, to Bill's point, they have to find the problem and they have to solve the problem and they have to heal the pain for that consumer. And if they're not in touch with that, they're missing something big.
Switching gears a little bit, you know, Bill was talking about the internet, and you know, obviously it's been around for so many years, but it's still